Oh, hello and welcome to the MythWits. I'm your host, Peter Bryant. And before we get any further, this show is not safe for work. Joining me this yes, Mike.
Pete.
Yeah, what's that?
Pete, first of all, I'd like to introduce myself. My name is Mike. I'm one of the co-hosts.
Right.
Second of all, Pete, I want to know, is this show safe for a 42-year-old homicidal chaperone in a cabin full of 11-year-old delinquent, pretentious, and over-entitled Catholic school shitheads whose parents think that they're so fucking pretentious little shit Johnny can't do anything wrong and is such a fucking little angel that there's no fucking rum for 5 fucking days? Kill me. Just kill me. Is this show safe for that?
I think it's safe for that. I think we're pretty much safe for that.
Okay.
Well, that's a relief.
So apparently, Mike, you had a weekend with Mike didn't join us last weekend. He wasn't here if you hadn't noticed.
Yeah, I was in hell.
Hey, we got to fix that intro video again. No sound again. We'll fix it next time.
Good stuff.
So if you guys didn't hear the sound in the intro video, that's why. All right. Yeah, Mike went away to a little springtime camp, little pre-spring camp with the kids.
Yeah, it's kind of a neat camp experience for the kids. It's called North Bay. I think there are franchises all over the country. Zach, maybe you've heard of this too, but the general thing is, and it's pretty non-secular, but it's basically it's bringing the sociological and the ecological, some of those same factors together, like an invasive species and a degraded condition can happen both in the ecology, and they go and they actually do some science and kind of learn about that, and as well as sort of make analogies to in the cities and where they live and how and in interpersonal and intrapersonal interactions with their parents, their people that they just all their friends who they interact with, and it really kind of brings those two things together. The program is amazing. They also have zip lines. It sort of challenges the kids to kind of do some challenging things like zip line and ropes course and things like that. As well, they have to have parent chaperones. So my son's class has 14 boys in it. I got basically, since I was a scout leader for many years, they knew I'd be able to handle this, but they gave me like the more difficult boys and my son, because let's just face it, my son is not the difficult one, but they gave me a lot of the difficult boys, so it was very trying at times. So that being said, we are back on track. So,
all right.
We're good. We're good.
Back in the land of milk and rummy.
Back in Kraken. All right, Pete. So what do we got going on here?
Okay, so this week we have Dr. Zachary Moore rejoining us again.
A rejoiner.
A rejoiner, yes, which we'd love to have our guest back on. Last time he was here, we did not talk about cancer research or the evolution of cancer at all,
not enough.
Well, not enough. I mean, a little bit. I mean, very minor. We sidetracked onto atheism and secularism and all these other things. So I double booked a guest this week, and then I asked one of the guests to, hey, could you do it another week? And he was like, yeah, sure. And then I found out that I didn't actually double book because I had rescheduled one of the other guys and hadn't realized. I've had a lot of turmoil these past couple weeks because I sold my house and I'm moving into a new house and they're building it. And right now, as you can see, I'm not in my regular studio. I'm in between in somebody else's house. It's really like jumbled up, so it's been a little hectic for me. So anyway, I didn't have anybody, and
Very pretty though.
Oh, thank you. It's rather sweet.
I like it.
I didn't have a guest, and I was just like, Zach, it'd be great if you come back on and could talk about the stuff you wanted to talk about to begin with. And he was available and graced us with his presence. So welcome to the show, Zach.
It's my pleasure to be here.
Now, just so everyone knows, Zachary Moore is a what is your job? Are you a cancer research person?
No, it's so. I'll go ahead and give my own intro if you don't.
Okay,
mind.
there you go.
So,
awesome. Thank you.
So my bona fides, as it were. So I do have a PhD in molecular biology. I got that from the University of Cincinnati, and I studied molecular biology there. And what my sort of dissertation thesis was on primarily was on it was in the realm of cardiovascular medicine and focusing on smooth muscle cells that are found in the lining of arteries and such. And I was looking at in certain cases, if you have like heart disease, you might get something called an angioplasty. Have you ever heard of this, where they take like a little balloon and they thread it up there and they blow it up? And the idea with the angioplasty is that you actually compress the cholesterol plaque against the sides of the artery and you open up the flow so you don't have a stenosis. And what ends up happening in about 30% of the time, usually between about 3 to 6 months later, the artery just starts closing in on itself irreversibly. And what they tried to do for a while is they tried to put in these stents, and they would actually put in these little wire mesh things, and they would expand them up with a balloon, and it would like prop the artery open. But the problem was that the cells, the actual cells in the artery, started growing through the mesh. Right, so it wasn't a mechanical issue. It was the cells themselves are growing, and they grew straight through the mesh and closed it off and created a lot of problems that way. So I was studying those muscle cells and how they were being transformed and why they were growing and multiplying and moving around and doing all the things that they're really not supposed to do. And so that was my my doctoral dissertation, studying those types of things. I ended up doing a fellowship at UT Southwestern Medical Center for about a year. Did not really find myself enamored with the academic track. Being a laboratory and doing experiments and things like that was interesting, and and the people were great, but everything just moves really, really slowly. It just, I was pulling my hair out, and at the time, you're trying to, I was trying to get a couple different mutant mice models characterized, and there was, all this work in the lab, but also a lot of downtime. And so in between all the different experiments, I couldn't really go home, so I would just sit there in the lab and I would write little articles about evolution, basically, and that led to the Evolution 101 podcast, which some people know about. And so as I was doing this, I was writing more and more, and I was really enjoying that. And I was also sort of getting bored with where I was, and I was looking around to see what other options were there for people that have PhDs. I'm like, well, the only people that I'd ever encountered and learned from really were other people with PhDs who'd stayed in the lab and had continued to do research. And I'm like, well, that's the only option out there, right? Well, no, it's because everyone else who left and went someplace else, I was no longer in discussion with them. I was no longer learning from them. So I had to do a little bit of work and try to sort of familiarize myself with some of the other things, other options that are out there career-wise. And one that I found that really resonated with me was medical writing. I didn't even realize this was a thing, but it's basically like technical writing, but writing about medical scientific topics for various audiences. And there's lots of different ways that you can do this. You can do sort of medical education writing for physicians. You can do it in such a way where it's actually like for credit, so all physicians have to keep what's called continuing medical education credits so that they keep their licenses current. So they always have to be learning about the new techniques, the new drugs that are coming out. You can also do medical education for patients or nurses or other sorts of audiences. There's also really, really highly technical medical writing, which is regulatory writing, which is, I don't know if you've ever gotten like a prescription and it comes with like a little insert and you open it up and it's like little tiny print, like you need a magnifying glass to read it.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
So there are people that write those things, and it's basically like a combination of science talk and legalese, because that's the language that has to be approved by the Food and Drug Administration to specifically say how this drug is supposed to be used. And I would probably blow my brains out if I had to write those types of things, but there are people that do write them, and they get paid very well for that. What I found myself sort of gravitating towards was I ended up in a company that was doing medical writing specifically for oncology, and this is where I kind of got into the cancer scene. And what I found was that it was a really easy fit for me to learn about cancer, because I'd come from a cardiovascular background, and this was oncology, and it's a totally different discipline. But what makes a cancer cell is the fact that it is growing where it's not growing when it's not supposed to be growing, and moving into places where it's not supposed to be. And that's exactly what I had been studying with smooth muscle cells. I'd been studying them, growing when they're not supposed to be growing and moving into places where they're not supposed to be. So a lot of the molecular mechanisms were pretty much the same. And so I was able to familiarize myself pretty easily with all the different concepts, and learn a little bit more about how clinical research works, which is pretty different from the way that basic research or benchtop research works. So I ended up as a professional medical writer, and I don't specialize only in oncology now. I do a little bit more of other stuff, but I still am pretty strong in oncology, and I know that area really well.
Now, okay, so wait a minute. Back up for just a sec. I have one question. My father-in-law actually just got, in the past year, he had to get angioplasty, and he actually did get 2 stents installed. They're still installing stents. Have they worked out either the material or made some modifications? Since obviously, that must have been, gosh, how long ago you studied? No, I'm just kidding.
That was it was about 15 years ago. Okay. That I was studying that, yeah. And I really haven't kept up with that. But at the time, what they were doing experimentally was they were trying to figure out if there were different drugs so that they could coat the stent in different types of drugs that would inhibit. And actually, a lot of the drugs that they were using were anti-cancer drugs, because they work in very much the same way. So if you coat this stent in drug, and maybe it's like a kind of like a plastic almost, where the drug is infused into the plastic and it just sort of very slowly leaches out and comes in contact with the cells. It's almost like giving a very low dose. It's kind of like how some women get the birth control that's injected, the depot shot, which is actually coming for men as well, I think, in a couple of years, which I'm looking forward to.
Yeah, but I did it the old-fashioned way.
Well, there's always that.
I earned it.
But that was the general approach at the time. They were trying to figure out all sorts of things to coat the stents with that would stop the cells from growing. So I'm imagining that's probably where they still are.
Right. So you say medical writer. When I was going for my bachelor's, which I never quite finished, I was doing an interdisciplinary study. My bachelor was going to be in science writing, and which is I assume is similar. And one of the key things that was a take home from that was, and the whole entire reason for that interdisciplinary degree was being able to understand the science, the complexities of the science, and how science works and how studies work, and and all the particulars of it, but also be able to speak humanese, so that normal people could read it, so that you could explain these huge complex things to people who are not scientists for a living.
Like me.
Does your medical research, your medical writing, are you writing for a more of a layman audience, or are you writing for other medical professionals?
It depends, yeah, and even medical professionals. I mean, you might be surprised, but just being a physician, and I mean no disrespect to physicians, but just being a physician does not make you scientifically literate in the same way that a scientist would be, especially when it comes to sort of the latest and greatest research, right? And
sure.
the way that the field, especially in oncology, is moving, it's becoming very, very science driven, and we can get into that a little bit later as well. But the way that physicians have to understand, they're approaching things strictly from a clinical point of view, right? Unless you're a physician scientist, unless you're doing research as a physician as well. Well, here in Texas, of course, we have the UT Southwestern Medical Center. We have MD Anderson Cancer Center. These are very well-renowned research institutions where the doctors there do fantastic research, and many of them have MDs and PhDs. But in order to practice as a physician, I mean, you do have to know like some basic level of science, but really the most important thing that you care about is what kind of patient can I use this drug in? What are the side effects? What should I look out for? How do I apply this in the differential diagnosis and manage everything else with the patient? So it's a very clinically focused. It's not necessarily scientifically focused. So I'm not saying that a physician is necessarily a layman when it comes to scientific topics, but it's kind of in the same realm. Although you talk about speaking humanese, and this was never something that was explicitly taught to me in my PhD program, although it probably should have been. But one of the things that I did as I was going through my graduate research is, I'd have to present every so often, and I'd always give the presentation first to my mother. And again, no disrespect to my mother, but she can not science her way out of anything, really. And so if I was able to explain the subject in a way that at the end of it she understood what I was talking about, then I was like, okay, now I really got it and I can really communicate it. So it wasn't really something that was formally taught to me, but it was something that I did pick up as part of going through if you're doing it right, if you're doing a science PhD right, you are going to become a good communicator. That's sort of good. Part of it. Yeah.
Right.
All right. So we're gonna cure cancer tonight, right, Pete?
Yeah.
Isn't that what that's tonight's goal? So.
Which kind? Which cancer?
All of them.
Because they're like
all of it. Cancer.
It's like 1,000. It's like 1,000 different diseases, right?
No. What do you mean? It's
cancer. Oh yeah, we're gonna.
Right, what are you talking about?
The cancer, right?
Yeah, the cancer. Right. Someone still got the cancer, so.
Right.
We're gonna cure it all.
Right.
So let's go. All right. So let's start with this. Why is cancer so difficult? I mean, what makes it so difficult that all these years and all this money and all this research and blah blah blah. What makes it so difficult?
Well, two reasons. One, we have not known a lot about it for a long time. And number two, cancer is a survivor, right? So we talk about cancer survivors, people that are living with cancer and being treated for cancer. Well, cancer is itself a survivor. The way that it operates is it is only looking out for its own interest, and it is using every tool at its disposal to try to stay alive and try to reproduce. Mutate itself, find another crack to hide in. It's actually evolutionarily quite astounding what it's able to do. And I'm speaking of cancer as if it's an entity and a thing.
Yeah, sure.
It's not actually thinking these things.
Right.
But the way that it operates, and it's a pretty awesome example of the way that evolutionary processes can optimize something for certain situations, but those are the main two reasons. Number one, we didn't know hardly anything about it up until very recently. I mean, just that question that you guys just asked. What kind of cancer? That was a relatively recent question that we've been answering. I mean, we used to think that cancer was cancer, and you found it in this place, and you found it in this place, and everyone sort of had the same thing happen to them eventually, that they all died because we didn't have any good treatments. The best that we could do, really from the ancient days of medicine until not too long ago, actually about the 1950s or so, was try to cut it out. If we found it, we try to cut it out, and usually by the time it got big enough where we could see it, it was probably too late. So you cut out the big tumor, whatever you're able to find, but of course there's all sorts of other little bits and little tendrils that are growing. And in fact, that's how cancer gets its name, right? So the ancients would see tumors growing, and they would try to cut it out, and they would see the cancer tissue that remained, and it kind of looked like little crab pincers, like sort of reaching up into the tissue. And so cancer actually just means crab, right? So it's like the constellation Cancer is a crab.
Oh, okay, all right.
Yeah.
Oh, okay, cool. That makes sense. I mean, not cool, but yeah. All right, look, I'm gonna preface anything I say on this show tonight, if I'm in awe of cancer in any way, believe me, look at the title of the show. I'm not a fan of cancer.
Yeah.
Okay, I'm just, but I respect its
The biology of
the
it.
biology of it. Yeah,
Yeah.
it's very very interesting stuff. You know, and you know, it's a horrible thing, and I'm terribly afraid of it. I don't know why. My wife says I have a phobia of it. I'm always like, I got this lump. I hope it's not cancer, right?
Right.
You know, but I mean, and from what I've been reading, it's kind of a common thing for people because it's a scary thing to get.
It's a scary and it's and we worry about this now much more because frankly modern medicine has made it so that we live longer, and one of the things that is very clear about cancer overall is that it tends to be a disease of the elderly.
Yes.
And one of the reasons, and that is in part because of its biology, because of the way it comes about, and as we were saying before, there's all these different types of cancer. So all the different cancers are coming about all sorts of different ways. They're all different mutations. There are some cancers that have a very specific mutation associated with them every time. And then there's some cancers that we just don't know. There could be any number of things. Sarcomas are particularly complicated. There's all sorts of chromosomal aberrations and translocations that have been characterized. But if you look at a list of everything that's possible, that can possibly go wrong in a sarcoma, it's like a whole list of different chromosome changes. And it's like, what is this? It's like alphabet soup. It's hard to pin this down into any one thing. And that's what we've been trying to do as we've been learning more about cancer, is trying to figure out, okay, what are we actually looking at? And the first great insight was that the tissue in which it arises has a big impact. So if so breast cancer is a tumor that arises in the breast. It can either arise in the ductal tissue, or it can arise in the lobular tissue. So it's a carcinoma because of the layer of cells that it arises in, but it's either in the ducts or it's in the lobes, and they act differently. Right? So even in the breast cancer, right? So one breast cancer may be different from another based on the types of tissue that it comes out of, and even within ductal carcinoma, there's several different variations in there as well. So there's what's called hormone sensitive or hormone receptor sensitive breast cancer, which is driven primarily by overexpression of the estrogen receptor and possibly the progesterone receptor. Then there's also what's called HER2 positive breast cancer, which is associated with a particular growth factor receptor called HER2, that it basically operates, and very similar to the estrogen receptor, basically operates as a gas pedal, right? So if you push down your gas pedal in your car, the car moves forward. You take off the gas pedal, the car slows down and eventually stops. And there's also brakes, right? So if you want to stop the car right now, you hit a brake. And so in cells, there are gas pedals and there are brakes, right? So if the cell wants to start growing and getting active, it hits the gas, and it starts dividing and growing and moving in different places, and if it wants to slow down and stop, there's a brake that it hits, and there's two ways that you can fuck up a cell and make it two basic ways you can fuck up a cell and make it cancerous. Number one, you can put a brick on the gas pedal, in which case it just keeps going and going and going and going and going, or you can cut the brakes, in which case it'll go and never stop. Oh, and okay. For the most part, most of the tumors and aberrations and chromosomal rearrangements amount to either putting a brick on the gas pedal or cutting the brakes.
So well, just real quick. So the gas pedal, that's like when they say it's a very aggressive tumor or something like that. Is that usually one that's got the gas pedal pressed down? Is that usually what that means? Okay.
Yeah. So HER2 positive breast cancer, for example, the gas pedal is pressed down, and the cells will grow and grow and grow and grow, and they just will not stop. And for years, women who had this, and once they discovered this, you could test for this, and they could basically do a biopsy, pull a little bit of the tumor out and slice it up and look at it under a microscope, and they could detect where HER2 was, and they said, well, there's a lot of HER2 on these, so you're probably HER2 positive, and they would throw chemotherapy at you, and the strongest stuff they had, and it didn't really do much. It didn't really do much for these women until, and this is when sort of the game started changing. And I might back up just a little bit. I don't want to do short shrift to chemotherapy, because chemotherapy was a game changer in its time, right? So we were talking about in the 50s when it was basically surgery or nothing. And then they developed radiation therapy, right? So after the atomic age, they started playing around with different radionuclides and radiation, and they knew that exposure to radiation could kill tissue. So they started playing around with exposure to radiation therapy as an alternative to surgery, or sometimes an adjuvant to surgery. But one of the big game changers actually in the 60s was the development of chemotherapy.
Okay.
Because they didn't have anything. There was no drug that would work for cancer, and they didn't really know what kind of drug could work for cancer. And so they did basically like this massive screen. It was actually the government, the United States government did this. They had all these samples of chemicals that they'd collected from all over, and they just isolated the chemicals and purified them, and they exposed them. They put them in a dish basically with some cancer cells, and all they did was just one after another, after another, after another, chemical 1, 2, 3, 4, etc. And they just marked which ones killed the cancer cells in the dish. And the ones that killed the cancer cells in the dish, they went back and characterized them and said, okay, well, what was that? And one of the big ones that was is really like the first cancer blockbuster drug was something called paclitaxel, which was a drug that was isolated from the bark of the Pacific yew tree. So a massive evergreen tree that grows in western states. And it's just this cancer drug that's just been sitting there in the bark all this time, and they isolated it from that. There's there's a cousin of the Pacific yew that you see a lot, or at least I see a lot in the Midwest. People use it as landscaping, and that also has a very similar cancer drug in its bark. And it's funny to when I go around and I see people using these bushes in their homes as decorations, I'm like, oh, that's cancer drug right there. Interesting.
If they only knew.
So they could mix this in 100 parts water and shake it, and then do that again and again. No, I'm kidding.
Not water, actually. No.
You start with the cancer and do that, dummy.
Yeah.
Right. Okay. No, it was a homeopathy joke. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
Yeah. But no, the water thing is actually was critical. So paclitaxel actually does not dissolve in water at all. So they had to dissolve it in essentially castor oil, and that goes into a drip bag that goes into somebody's vein. And one of the side effects with paclitaxel, as well as the other one, the similar drug, docetaxel, is because of that delivery system. Patients sometimes react just to the castor oil delivery system, and they'll have hypersensitivity reactions, and it'll be like a really bad, nasty reaction to that thing. So that's what makes that difficult. So chemotherapy was the best thing at the time in order to kill off the cancer cells, and paclitaxel and the other taxanes worked really elegantly. So the way that cells divide is, I'm sure you've seen this like in your science textbooks, like all the chromosomes sort of condensed, and then the mitotic spindle forms, and all the chromosomes line up in the middle, and then they pull apart. Yeah. And as they pull apart, it splits off into two. Well, so that doesn't happen if you don't have this spindle. It's a physical mechanism, like two combs pulling away at each other. And what paclitaxel does is it stops that spindle from breaking down. So any cell that tries to divide, if it's been exposed to paclitaxel, the comb forms, and then it can't break down again. It can't decompose itself, and so the cells are stuck and they die. What it does is any cells that are rapidly dividing, if you're being exposed to paclitaxel, they just up and die. Which is why chemotherapy is associated with, your hair falls off, your fingernails fall out.
Yeah. All the fast reproducing cells.
Right, and not just on the outside. So anywhere.
Stomach lining.
Yeah, your stomach lining. But basically everything from your mouth to your asshole. Fluffs off. And,
hey, that's elementary, my dear Zachary.
That's right. And it doesn't happen for everybody, but it happens enough, and it's incredibly unpleasant. But again, it was better than dying. And
yes, anal sloughing is very unwanted.
Right.
All right, so let's back up for a second because we have our number one fan
who's
listening, and I'll go ahead and ask this, Pete. Let me hold on. I gotta switch the thing to me. Hi. So David's asking a couple of animal questions, and the first one is about the sharks. He's like, basically, is it true about sharks that they definitely get cancer? And then the second one, and you can wrap your answer into this because it's basically a follow-up question. He's asking, is there any animals any that we've discovered that are truly cancer-free? Basically, so start with the sharks, end with the no cancer.
So I'm not a shark expert, but I have sort of looked into that claim, and from what I can tell, that's something of a myth. So I believe the sharks are capable of getting cancer. It's just very unlikely that they would. I think so. Again, we were talking about cancer being a disease of the very old, typically, because as your cells break down, as your systems break down. Your immune system in particular is always scavenging for cancer cells. So the three of us sitting here right now, we probably have cancer inside of us, literally right now.
Fuck!
Someplace.
It's in my ass, I just know it.
But if our immune systems are active, they're probably seeking it out and finding whatever that cell is and killing it and doing away with it. And that is what happens typically. But as we get older, our immune systems become less effective and less efficient, and then they don't catch these little tiny tumors as they're forming, and so they get to grow. So with any organism that dies very quickly, like let's say mayflies, I don't imagine that cancer is a problem with mayflies because they only last a few days.
They don't live long enough.
Yeah, I don't think they live long enough. With sharks, I don't know if sharks are particularly long-lived. I would guess that they're probably not, though.
All right, so are there any mammals that we know of that are cancer-free? Let's start with that.
Not that I'm aware of. No.
Okay.
There are lots of
the
them.
Fish. How about the fishal kingdom? Your crabs.
Everything I've heard, man, they find tumors. They find tumors in everything, from what my understanding.
Yeah, well, it's with fish, it's a tough one because they get sort of cysts in them a lot. I know parasites like to burrow inside of them, and they'll get like bumps and stuff that are actually cysts, not necessarily tumors. That's an interesting question. I don't really know if cancer is maybe a mammalian thing. I wouldn't think so, though. Like the way our DNA works is very similar. The way our immune systems work is very different. But the way our DNA works is very similar. And I would imagine that the sorts of things that can happen in humans and other mammals might happen in other organisms as well.
Yeah, I would imagine.
How about the insect world? Real quick, what about the insect world? Like, even the longer-lived insects, just with the way their development, their DNA, and their general anatomy, is that something that have we found or?
I don't know that anybody's studying cancer in insects. Dude, that's interesting, though.
You should study cancer in insects.
Yeah,
wide open.
If I ever want to go back in academics, I'm sure that's a field that's wide open.
Rock.
I'll corner the market.
You got the spider cancer.
Yeah, all by yourself.
I'll give you an acknowledgement of my first grant application. How's that?
All right. There you go, Mike. There you go.
That's right.
So
you know how many footnotes I have in everyone's memoirs?
First it was Iron GM, and then it was insect cancer cures.
Yeah.
That's right.
I could cure cancer in spiders. Why would you?
Save the spider.
No, but in all seriousness, I mean, if you think about it, there's probably, just the way cells divide is pretty universal, right, among animals. I mean, it's a pretty universal thing, and that's where the problem occurs. So I would imagine that the mechanism is there. It's kind of like I got an argument with somebody about GM foods, and I was like, okay, I understand your concerns. I get the concerns. But what's the mechanism? Like, you're worried about it because it's going to do what? What would be
What
the
about
mechanism?
the children? It's
No,
the
but I'm just saying.
children.
I'm just like, what would be the mechanism? Like, how would it even do anything if it doesn't poison you? Is it just gonna magic something into you? I just don't get it. And so I imagine, like, I'm just saying, just the standard mechanism would probably be.
Yeah, I think with the GM stuff, the only thing that really makes sense is, well, maybe you'll introduce some novel toxin, and all of a sudden there'll be corn that kills people or something like that.
Right, but that'll be quick. That's not something that's going to go down generations and, like, you know.
It would be obvious.
But that's a whole nother subject. Let's not even go down that track.
Yeah.
So, all right, so so chemo came along, and then
changed the game.
Changed the game, and
Right.
then what comes next after chemo? What's the next big breakthrough?
Right, and so then we get into what I was saying before, how you can start to characterize these different tumors, and you notice, right? So the step one is noticing that there's a difference between a breast tumor, for example, and a lung tumor, right? So those are the two, basically breast cancer in women and lung cancer in men. Those are the most common cancers, and so you notice that there actually is a difference between the two of them. They don't necessarily respond to the same drugs. They might, but they might not. They might look different. They might have different genes that are turned on or turned off. And you notice that, okay, so the way that we're approaching these, if you specialize in breast cancer, that's not necessarily applicable to lung cancer. So there started to be this movement away from just being specializing as an oncologist, right? So that's a specialty in and of itself within medicine, is being an oncologist. But now the question is, well, what kind of oncologist are you? And you know, within the community, right? If you go and you're treated, you know, at your local cancer clinic or whatever, you're probably going to run into people that don't really specialize very much, because they're just operating at the community level, and they're probably seeing a lot of lung cancer, they're probably seeing a lot of breast cancer, you know, maybe a little bit of lymphoma, a couple melanomas, you know, who knows what. But it's kind of like it's just a grab bag. But then at the really high level places like MD Anderson and Memorial Sloan Kettering and some of these other places, Dana-Farber, those places started specializing, and you started looking at let's just look at lung cancer specifically, and you found a lot of these research scientists that were sort of pushing it in that direction, where, okay, we're going to look just at lung, or we're going to look just at breast and figure this one out. And that's kind of the way that it developed, and that's the way the research developed. And it's to the point now where you actually have a separate treatment algorithm, a completely separate treatment algorithm for people who have lung cancer versus breast cancer. People who have what are called blood cancers, you know, like lymphomas and myeloma and stuff like that. That's even a different subspecialty, right? So, you know, hematologists, there's sort of hematology, oncology, because of that divide. And so as they started looking more and more, what are the differences? They wanted to learn more and more about these, you know, these location tissue-specific cancers, and that's when they started getting into the stuff that I was talking about before, with the HER2 and the ER and some of these other things. And what I was saying before with HER2-positive breast cancer, this was a really bad situation. If you're a woman and you had HER2-positive breast cancer, it was bad. Right? Your chances were not good, because they would give you, you know, they knew it was a very aggressive tumor. It was going to grow really, really fast, and they would hit you with the hardest chemotherapy that they had. But it probably was not. If it got to a certain point, it was probably not going to save your life anymore, and it was probably not going to prolong your life either. And the same research group that initially characterized HER2, they developed a new type of drug. It was the broader category is targeted therapy. So instead of chemotherapy, you're just giving somebody a kind of a chemical that kills off fast-growing cells. The question was, can we give somebody a drug that specifically targets these HER2-positive cells and kill them off? Right, because the HER2 is the problem. Maybe targeting that specifically can be the solution, because the chemotherapy just wasn't working. They were just growing too fast. And so they developed a drug called trastuzumab. which is actually it's just a monoclonal antibody. So an antibody is, you probably know, an antibody is part of your immune system, right? So you've heard, you got to get the antibodies up. And so an antibody is it's a protein. It's like a Y shape kind of, and on one end it sticks to whatever it's hunting, and the other end it has a little signaling part of it that tells the immune system, okay, I've just stuck to this thing. Now come in here and destroy it, basically.
Oh, okay.
So it's kind of like a smart weapon almost. Right? And so you put these antibodies into a person, and they circulate around, and it only binds to the thing that is designed to stick to. And so the antibody that they designed was designed to stick to just the HER2. So they would inject this in a woman, and it would circulate around, and then eventually it would come in contact with the tumor, and it would stick to it, and just the tumor. And then presumably, we don't actually know what happened after that point, but presumably the immune system would kick on or something would happen, and the tumor would just shut down and stop growing, either slow down or stop growing altogether, and then they would hit it with chemo, and it would just go and be gone, essentially, for the most part. And that was a total game changer as well. Targeting HER2 made HER2-positive breast cancer no longer an out-and-out death sentence. It's still bad, but there's lots of drugs now. So there's still trastuzumab. There's another monoclonal antibody that was developed by the same company and works very similar ways. And now there's even a newer one, and this is even cooler because this is the technology, the science actually, that I was studying when I was a grad student. So it's called an antibody-drug conjugate. So the idea is you take this smart, molecule that the antibody naturally is. It seeks out whatever the target is, and it already has this end. So the back end of it is a signal to the immune system that says, "Come in and destroy this." So that's bad enough. But then you attach basically a chemotherapy bomb to it.
Oh shit! Okay.
And so it comes in and it sticks to the tumor like it's supposed to, and then the chemotherapy comes in contact with it, and it delivers a highly concentrated dose of chemo right to the tumor itself, and you avoid all these side effects too. So that's what's really nice too is what they're using for the chemotherapies that they're attaching to these molecules are actually chemotherapies that were developed. I think 10 or 20 years ago, that were too toxic. That they worked really well, but they were too toxic to ever use in humans.
They work really well. They kill cells.
Right.
They kill cells.
Well, you can't use them as carpet bombing, but yeah.
Right.
But you can use them as smart bombs, and so they attach them to these monoclonal antibodies, and they zip right into the tumor and deliver a concentrated dose of this nasty chemotherapy, and it kills off the tumor, and that's kind of a new game changer as well.
Now, you were talking about that the way you just explained it, and it made me think about, I can't even think of the words. I has words, but
I can't brain.
Yeah. But it was something similar that I had seen or read about years ago, where they were using similar techniques to narrow in on like a narrowband radiation. I think they were like hitting something from like various angles, and I wasn't lasers, but it was like like almost
a proton
like a laser.
beam.
Yeah.
I think that's a proton beam thing. Yeah.
Now,
and I don't know that much about.
Still... No?
No. I think that's the state of the art now. That's especially for brain tumors, and CNS disease is not really my specialty, but they use a lot of radiotherapy for that, and the way I understand that it works is they position it in different parts of the skull, and it all comes down, and where it intersects is where the beam is strongest. So it's almost like they sort of teleport a little bit of radiation right into the spot in your brain where the tumor is, and just
it's like
zap
a magnifying glass in the sun. It's just
very much like that.
Yeah.
And that's been a game changer in terms of radiotherapy too, because before that it was just basically, well, we'll sort of section off this part of your body and just irradiate that, and you'll get burns and stuff like that, and all sorts of other side effects. But it wasn't precise, and so that's been going in the same direction. So a higher degree of precision, obviously, and a higher degree of efficacy is the way that you improve things.
So
Okay,
they're not able to use that for other cancers, though, or you're saying they're only.
It depends on the cancer. Some cancers are not really. They don't respond to radiation. Some respond really well to radiation. It all depends. Prostate cancer generally does pretty well with radiation.
Woohoo!
Yeah, and it also, depending on the prostate cancer, they almost always will start you with a hormone therapy because it's driven by the androgen receptor, and so they'll give you basically like a neutering drug. It'll shut down all those male hormones to try to turn them off.
All right, time out, Pete. He's just said a lot of things that you need to comment on. I know. I feel it.
Nope,
I'm
gonna let it go.
There was ass cancer, neutering, the anal
go.
cavity. There's.
Are we getting?
Wait a minute. La 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 la.
and you also had a question beforehand, so go. What were you going to ask?
So I remember reading about a drug, or I don't know if it was a drug or a procedure, many moons ago.
Yeah.
It was a medicine or a regime that attacked the blood vessel making. So I know a tumor starts to grow, and then it needs blood to feed it. So then it sends out. It starts building. It starts building arteries.
Right.
They supply blood, and apparently there was a drug that I think it was a drug that they used that would attack the tumor and shut that down and starve it out.
Yeah.
Did that work out? Is that something they're still using, or?
So there have been mixed results, basically. So the class of drugs that you're talking about, there's not just one. There's a whole bunch, actually. They're called anti-angiogenic drugs. And the basic idea, it was set out, there's a classic paper that was published in the late 90s that said, hey, here's this fact that we know about cancer, right? So a tumor starts, and it's just a single cell, and then the cell divides, and then the 2, 4, 8, 16, etc. And as these cells get, as there's more of them, the tumor gets bigger. Well, one of the physical facts of the way that cells work is they can't absorb nutrients beyond a certain distance, and it's something like I can't remember what it is. Let's say 3 millimeters or something like that.
Okay.
So a tumor can get 3 millimeters in diameter without any blood supply. Right? It's just sitting there. It's just soaking up from the surrounding, fluids and stuff like that, just soaking up nutrients, and it's surviving. But if it wants to get bigger, it has to figure out a way to trick the body into giving it blood. All right, and this is one of those things where I was talking about before, how cancer is an amazing survivor, because somehow this small little cluster of cells figures out how to turn on the right signaling hormones and growth factors that tell the body to basically, okay, here's this part of us that needs blood, so we're going to start growing blood vessels, and they start branching off from the existing circulatory system, and they go up into the tumor and start digging into the tumor, and all of a sudden it's got a blood supply, and now it can grow even bigger, and it's got its own arteries flowing into it, which is crazy.
I have a question related to that, and I'm going somewhere with this, so hear me out. Well, wait a minute, hold on. I forget about the switching. All right, so what conceivably, or at least observably, what is the fastest that a cancerous mass has been able to grow an artery system? Like, how fast have we observed a cancer or a tumor to completely just, to get huge and,
Well, I mean, so in humans, that'd be a tough one, because you'd have to know where the tumor is first to be able to watch it. You can do that, I think. I'm sure you could do that in animal models, and we do have a lot of mouse models that a lot of different specific mice that have been raised that are highly susceptible to cancer. And one of the standard procedures actually in developing drugs is something called a xenograft assay, which is basically you take a type of a mouse that is very susceptible to cancer, and you inject a few human tumor cells into it. And wherever they sort of land in the body, that's where a tumor starts growing. And you can, if you want, you can sit down there and watch the tumor grow on the side of the mouse, and watch it become vascularized. I would imagine that probably happens in a matter of weeks. I've never done those experiments myself, so I don't know what it takes. When I'm looking at timescales with those sorts of things, it's usually okay. We have the mice with the tumors already at time 0, and then we give them the drug, and then then the tumors drop away or whatever. So I don't actually know how long it would take a mouse undergoing a xenograft to have the tumor like big enough so it's visible and big enough so it's vascularized, but I'm guessing on the matter of weeks.
Oh,
Okay.
ooh.
Let me explain. So I'm thinking once we really do wrap our heads around cancer, once we really do bend it over and just beat it, I'm imagining that we'll start to learn things from it and how it works, and cross over to being able to control how and when we want to turn on and off a lot of these growth and the hormones and like you're saying, like say, hey, I want to be taller, so
I
make me
see.
taller, and using basically the science of cancer to make that happen. Or am I on the wrong track? I'm kind of like suppositionally proposing that.
No, that's interesting. I thought you were going in the direction of maybe weaponized cancer.
Oh God, no.
No.
Oh God, I hope not. Jesus.
No,
Which,
I'm not that. It's more of a zombies. No, it's more of a personal gain. I want to know what's in it for me. You know what I mean?
You ever see Akira? You ever see the movie Akira?
Yeah.
That's what you'd be. You'd be like Tetsuo.
Yeah, I don't want
There is-
yeah.
There is actually an example of that, something like that in biology now that we know of. So there's it's actually among Tasmanian devils. They have what appears to be a single tumor that they have been, the population of Tasmanian devils in Tasmania has been giving each other, right? They fight, and the tumor exists on their face. And when they fight each other, they open up wounds, and bits of tumor are scraped into the wounds of one to another, and then the tumor starts growing on the other one's face. And it's just this weird sort of tumor that can be dropped into an open wound and start growing. It's kind of crazy. But I was thinking you're going in that direction where you might be able to develop a tumor where you could just sort of like put it in a blow dart or maybe and it lands in somebody's neck and starts growing in their neck.
20 years, in 2 years, you're gonna be dead.
Right.
3 weeks later.
Right.
Kind of like a long form Walking Dead, maybe. I don't know.
That's true. Yeah. No, I was thinking.
No, but isn't there also isn't there a dog tumor that's been going around for a long time, like a really long time?
Yeah,
That can be passed from dog to dog to dog.
Yeah. It's this kind of the same deal as with the Tasmanian devil. Yeah.
Contagious cancer is just not. That's not cool at all.
Are either one of those cross species pollinating or?
Well, so it's interesting because dogs are placental and Tasmanian devils are marsupial. You would think so. The dogs are actually more closely related to us than Tasmanian devils. So you would think that if it was coming to anybody first, it would come to us rather than to the devil from the dog, or maybe the other way around. I don't know, but we'll see. Yeah. As for your other question, can you use the techniques or can you learn stuff from cancer in order to make ourselves better and stronger and faster? Maybe. I don't want to rule it out completely, but the problem is that so much of who we are and the way our bodies work is laid down in our development. And when I say development, I mean like embryologic development. It would be really hard to, like they have these in science fiction stuff and in comic books and stuff where you give somebody like a transgenomic beam or something like that, and they become 10 times as tall or 10 times as strong or whatever, and that's a hot load of BS.
Like the Hulk. Like the Hulk.
You could do it
just like the Hulk.
You could do it in your kids, like if you were really interested. I mean, no, seriously. So we have the technology. We have the technology to introduce novel genes into mice and other model organisms as well. But there's no reason why we couldn't do the same things with human embryos that we do with mouse embryos. So, for example, you probably have you guys seen like the green glowing mice?
Yes.
Yeah.
I've heard of it. I haven't seen them, but
right. So the green glowing mice, they have a protein, or it's a gene, I should say, that gives rise to a protein called green fluorescent protein. It is the protein that is found in jellyfish that allows them to glow green. And so all they did is they took that gene and they put it in mice and they had it express in all their tissues. And the mice go under black light and they glow. So there's no scientific reason why you couldn't do that to your own kids, right? So if you got sample embryos, and just like with in vitro fertilization, you get the embryos and they're fertilized and they're in the thing, and you use a really tiny little pipette, and you squirt the DNA in there. It'll happen just like with the mice, and
hey,
eventually.
What are you trying to say about my pipette?
If you're really trying, if you really want it to happen, you could have green glowing humans in 2 or 3 generations. It's just the ethical considerations are keeping us from doing that. And I would imagine that the same ethical considerations would keep you from, applying cancer DNA to you to get better at a jump shot or something.
Okay, so I guess with that I'm thinking about it. The what do you call it? The transmugenic type of things is going to be more on a DNA level. So if you're able to, at some point, we're able to just like literally take someone's DNA and modify it. We can basically put someone's DNA on a computer just like we can do on a program and say, all right, take these properties and I want you to make this now. Like we can Photoshop somebody's DNA basically.
Oh,
wow. All right, make them more like this and more like this. Now, conceivably, is that something that we'd be able to do if we extract my DNA, and then if they were to mix it, I think that's where the problem is you take my DNA, you modify it. How do you introduce it back into my genome and have the proper modifications take effect? Have my body go, oh, time to go to work, right? I mean, obviously that's going to take.
That's a retrovirus, right?
Okay, so yeah, again, a lot of these things are kind of set in stone because your development is done. But if you wanted to,
party pooper.
Okay, so let's say you really, really wanted to be green yourself. You want to be green. I
really do.
Then it's conceivable that you could have a retrovirus as a vector that's putting that gene in all the cells in your body. Again, it's technically feasible, I suppose. One other way of modifying genes instead of introducing them with a viral vector is epigenetically, right? So we might not be able to introduce genes or completely modify, rewrite all your genes, but we might be able to change the way in which your genes are expressed. So epigenetic regulation is so the DNA as a sequence exists as a physical molecule, right? So it's all wrapped up on itself. It's looped around these things called histones, and as long as they're wrapped around the histones, the machinery to replicate and translate from the DNA can't really get access to it. So it has to get unwound first, and there are certain ways that the histones can be modified that actually turn it off and make it really hard for those genes to be accessed. So if we got really good at epigenetics, you might be able to go, like, let's say there's a gene that, I don't know, I'm just spitballing here, a gene that makes you into kind of an asshole. And you could figure out what that gene was and turn it off. Turn it off. then you might have a much better personality and people like you more. I don't know. I'm just
Right, well,
throwing that out
let's
there.
let's just go something easy like eye color. I mean, couldn't we introduce that? And I mean, even all the cells in your body are still dying and dividing and regrowing and things. So if you've modified it, it's still going to be just a matter of weeks. Yeah, it's not going to happen like that, but it.
Yeah. Yeah. So that's conceivable, right? So people have brown eyes because the cells right underneath the cornea in the iris that sort of lay over the iris have melanin, right? And melanin is dark colored. So if those cells are producing melanin, then they're dark. People that have blue eyes have a mutation. It's actually a particular mutation. It only happened, from what we can tell, it only happened once in human history. So anyone that has blue eyes, we all share a common ancestor, so we are technically related. Although all humans are also
elitist.
Related. Well, we're related because we're mutants. Again, so I'm a mongrel and I'm a mutant.
I don't know about you, but I'm feeling very Neanderthal at the moment.
But yeah, so you could do that, sure, and it probably would. I don't know how frequently those cells turn over. I was just reading recently that there's a new procedure that you can actually. Somebody's offering to use a laser. Yes. To basically kill off those cells, and if you kill off the brown cells, then what's left is blue, or mostly blue.
Gonna make your brown eyes blue.
Screw that. You're not shooting lasers in my eyes just to turn them blue. Fuck that. I like my eye color. I think I'm going to keep it.
I actually had laser eye surgery, and I was really kind of, it was impressive in one sense. It was also kind of creepy in the other. So I wasn't really sedated. I think they gave me like some sort of a Vicodin or something like that. But I was still pretty with it when they did it to me, and they basically laid me back and had this contraption come down, and I couldn't really see anything because my eye was completely blocked. But when they turned the laser on, I could see all these sparkles of light. It was kind of like at the end of 2001.
Cool.
Yeah, but here's the creepy part. I could also smell my cornea burning off.
Oh, that's worse than going at the dentist and smelling your teeth.
Burning hair smell?
Yeah.
Yes.
That's my eye.
That's what I smell like when they burn. So I'm sitting there and I'm like, oh, wow, this is a beautiful rainbow. Oh, wow, I can smell my eyes burning. That's great.
So from what my understanding, I think my wife, she had hers done, and I think they gave her Ativan. So basically, she could tell all this stuff was going on. She just didn't care.
Right.
It's just like, burn my eyes.
Yeah.
My God, it's full of stars.
It's full of stars. And wait a minute, and bacon. No.
It's biking in my eyes, brain.
Before it gets too late and you have to go, what?
It is it's 10:40. Yeah. Just a time check.
So let's not get too far off track before we hit. Is there like? So you said there's some really cool stuff they're doing. Is there some cool stuff we haven't hit yet that you really want to talk about, cancer research wise?
Yeah. So I guess maybe one more. And another topic, just to close us off right after this, which is also a really important thing just in medicine, but also especially in cancer. But the other really cool development has been in what are called therapeutic vaccines. So the idea is, and I was saying before how normally our immune system is surveilling our cells and checking to see if there's any cancer popping up in our cells so it can kill it. And one of the core hypotheses about how cancer arises because there's some failure in the immune system. And so one of the things that has been proposed is that, well, what if we actually turbocharge the immune system so that it's looking specifically for the cancer there? Maybe it missed something for some reason, but we can fill in that gap. And
so boost the immune system for real?
Yeah, with vitamin C.
Right.
Finally, I mean, really boost it.
Boost it.
For realsies.
Well, in a very specific way.
Right.
So this is a vaccine. So we think of vaccines like the flu vaccine, right? So you get the shot and you're protected against it, right? A therapeutic vaccine is a little bit different. So the other vaccines that we get are prophylactic. They're to prevent you from getting sick. A therapeutic vaccine is after you've already gotten sick. So it's a way of activating your immune system to fight whatever it is that you have. And in the case of cancer, it would be cancer. So what they do is, and they've done this so far with prostate cancer, they actually have a drug not a drug, a procedure really on the market for prostate cancer, and they're working on other ones in other tumors. But essentially what they do is they take a sample of the tumor once it's been found and diagnosed. They pull it out and they chop it up, and they isolate the cells and all the different peptides and proteins that are unique to that tumor, and they put that in a dish with your immune cells. So they also extract your bone marrow basically, and they pull out
what you're saying is they toss your tumor.
Yeah, after a manner of speaking.
Oh, come on, no, nothing. Hello.
After a manner of speaking, but they've taken out your bone marrow and they've isolated dendritic cells, and dendritic cells are a key part of the immune system. They actually take little bits of protein and antigens and other things that it then takes that and introduces that to your immune system and says, hey, knocks on the door, says, look at this thing here. This is what you got to go kill. Right, so that's what the dendritic cells do. And so they take your specific dendritic cells and they put them in a dish and they grow them up, and then they expose them to the tumor, and they turn them on with a proprietary process. And so the dendritic cells are now saying, hey, this is what we're supposed to go kill. Okay, now we got it. And then they take all those dendritic cells and put them back into the patient, and they go back into the bone marrow and repopulate. And now the patient's immune system is looking for these tumors, the specific tumor that's been identified, and the goal is now, okay, now it's actually been turned on and it's looking for this particular tumor and it's going to go out and kill it, and that has potential to be a game changer as well.
Wow!
But that's also led to this other problem, and this is the thing I want to close out with. Those procedures, and you can imagine, right? So we're not just talking about taking a pill. We're not just talking about sticking something in the bag and dripping it down into your vein. We're talking about a whole big complicated mess of a process where you're actually pulling out tumor, and you're pulling out bone marrow and culturing in a laboratory and doing all this weird stuff to it, and then keeping it in the hospital and then putting it back in you. You can imagine that is not cheap.
No,
not by half. And in
funeral's
fact,
cheaper.
Right. Well,
yeah.
You joke, but and that this has been one of the big criticisms of that drug in particular, but other drugs like it, and this is sort of, it's kind of the other side, like the flip side of all this scientific development and the advances that we've seen. Is this is a lot of work, and in order to dig down into these tumors, and you're looking at specifically just these subgroups of tumors that have these genes that are turned on. You can imagine that you'll develop a drug that you find a new type of you characterize a new type of lung cancer, let's say, that has a particular gene that's turned on, and you develop a drug that totally shuts that down and kills that tumor. But there's only 10,000 patients in the world that have that particular type of tumor. And you've got a drug that cost you close to $1 billion to develop, let's say. Mm-hmm. So you've got $1 billion to make up and 10,000 potential customers. Now, how much are you going to charge for the drug?
Right. That's called boutique medicine right there.
Right. And so that's the problem. And the more and more we're learning about cancer, as I said, we realize that each cancer is kind of its own niche. They're all these. They do fit into these buckets, but the buckets are getting smaller, and then there's buckets inside buckets, and the way that the science is driving it is really cool and really exciting. But it's also driving it into a place where it's really hard to make money. And I say this, of course, the pharmaceutical companies are making lots of money, but right. They're taking bigger risks, and they're doing all sorts of weird things. There's two companies, this was just a couple months ago, Novartis and GlaxoSmithKline, who were major powerhouses, pharmaceutical companies, they actually did a massive asset swap where one was just not doing well, had too many failures in oncology, and the other had too many failures in vaccines. And so they're like, you know what? Let's just cut our losses. We'll give you the rest of our oncology stuff. You give us the rest of your vaccine stuff, and we'll sort of part ways. Because they, as big and as massive as these companies are, and they do make lots of money, with oncology, they weren't able to hack it.
Well, if
Which
Big
is crazy.
If Big Pharma can collaborate, oh man, what is this world coming to?
Well, it's funny because you hear that, hear a lot of people talking about Big Pharma, and I'm sure there's some stuff to that, but at the same time, what people got to realize is that these are businesses. They're in the business to make money, just like any other business, and it's all fine and good to say, oh, they shouldn't be trying to make money off of people and stuff like that, but it's like, okay, so you're going to give your entire paycheck to fix this? Well, no. I mean, it's like, oh, yeah. Remember, that's their paycheck. That's their livelihood, too.
Right.
It's got to be economically viable or no one's going to do it.
Right.
I think we talked about this last time when Zach was on. I think it was Zach. He walked us through the whole, the trials, and it's costing this much
it's a big
money.
deal.
Yeah.
And that's just the reality of the situation, unfortunately. And there's all sorts of ways to try to make the process more efficient. Because one of the big problem is that patent law restricts the amount of exclusivity that a company would have. So it's basically 17 years from start, from the word go, from when you discover this drug. You've got 17 years in order to make as much money as you possibly can. And so the companies are going up against the clock, and they know that they've got the generic coming in a couple of years, and they're trying to figure out any way possible to squeeze some more money out of it because they have to. They don't have the luxury of a long tail. Other markets. I've got a friend who's an author, right, and he's written tons of books. No, he's just written tons of books, and he spent I think like 10 or 15 years just writing book after book after book after book, and he's got I don't know how many books in print now. But each one, when it was released, sold a whole bunch, and then it kind of trailed off. But each one, even though it's 10 years later, each one sells like a certain amount per month. Like, it'd be 100 books a month, let's say, which is not a lot. But if he's got 100 books out there, then that's 10,000 books total per month, which is not bad. And that's a long tail. He can enjoy that tail for a much longer time, and he can take more risks now because he's got income coming in from all that. And unfortunately, pharmaceutical companies don't have that. I'm not arguing that they should. I'm not saying that that's how we fix the problem. There might be other ways to, the preclinical process. All these experiments in mice. There's some arguments that say, well, look, a lot of this is kind of a waste of time because we can't project, we can't extrapolate from a mouse to a human. So a lot of these preclinical experiments that take a long time, maybe we can do away with some of those, or maybe we can figure out some sort of a computerized model that would give us the same basic information in half the time or a tenth of the time or whatever, and less expense. I don't know what the problem is. I just know that there's a problem, and it's really, really amplified in cancer because cancer is at sort of the cutting edge, and they're delving much, much deeper into where science will let them go, and the market's just trying to keep up. And unfortunately, we're getting to the point now. It's actually kind of a tragedy. There's one company I know that's developing they had a really great drug that worked really well as an injection. It was first developed for IV administration, so it would go right into your vein, and then they developed it where they could just sort of inject it into your butt, subcutaneously. And
what is it with cancer in the butt?
And now they've developed a brand new, not exactly the same version of the drug, but a very similar drug that does very similar things, but better with fewer side effects. And it's oral. It's a pill. And you would think, oh, isn't this great? And it's the same drug, and and you don't even have to come to the doctor's office for it. You can just get a prescription filled and take the pill every day. And there's some cancers that are like that. So chronic.
Wait a minute. So they went from ass to mouth. just Sorry. I just took it to that level. Go ahead. I'm sorry. You're being all sciencey and stuff.
But there are some cancers already. CML, chronic myelogenous leukemia, that's characterized by the Philadelphia chromosome, which is another one of these predicted mutations. There's a drug called Gleevec that was invented, and it's a pill basically, and you take this pill once a day, and your cancer stays away, and that's awesome. It's not exactly
awesome.
It's not exactly a cure, but it's pretty close.
Right.
And so the idea is kind of the same. Like, wouldn't this be great if, instead of having these patients, take time out of their schedules and they have to come in and sit and get, the drip put in and all that kind of stuff. What if they could just stay home and take a pill? And that sounds great, and everything sounds great in theory. But then you realize that they've put so much R&D into this product that it's going to be $10,000 a pill.
Oh.
And that's just, and it's a pill. And there's something about that I think is just a really, I think it's going to have more of an impact, right? So you have, if you have to go into the doctor and there's nurses and there's all this stuff that you're dealing with, $10,000, it's still a lot, but it seems a little bit more reasonable. If it's a pill that you're putting in your mouth and it's $10,000 for that, oh my God. And so what's going to happen is people are going to start saying, wait a minute, for a pill? And it'll be like, well, that's what it cost. And then there's going to be.
Let's go back to the ass.
Yeah, and then they might do that. So physicians might actually, and that's the tragedy. Physicians might actually avoid doing that because of the backlash, and they'll be using an inferior drug. Because of that.
All right. Well, I know you got to go soon, but just real quick.
Or a posterior drug.
Can I, there's something I want to touch on.
Sure.
So brain cancers, and you can go through this really quick. I know brain cancers are particularly difficult to treat. Mainly, this is my understanding. You correct me if I'm wrong, because I probably am. Is drug delivery is very difficult because you got the blood-brain barrier, right?
Barrier. Yeah, exactly. So, and this is actually something that, in normal circumstances, is a really good thing, right? So the tissues that surround our brain and kind of create, a barrier. That's why we call it the blood-brain barrier. But it actually prevents a lot of things from getting in. And the idea is that, or the thought anyway, is that evolved as a way of protecting the brain. So if you might get exposed to some toxin or some poison or some bacteria or whatever, and it might go in your system, but as long as it was stayed out of your brain, you might still be okay. But the problem is that there's a lot of drugs that don't pass through the blood-brain barrier. So they've had to get really creative. So you have a drug, let's say like paclitaxel. I don't actually know if paclitaxel does. I suspect that it doesn't. But you might have a drug like that which works really great in lung cancer and breast cancer, but it does absolutely nothing for brain cancer. And so, so you run into issues with that as well. And then there's actually a difference between actual primary tumor of the central nervous system versus metastases. So a lot of cancers, once it develops far enough, it starts spreading around your body, and one of the places that it will go is into your brain. So you might end up with a brain tumor that's not actually brain cancer. It might actually be lung cancer, and it just ends up in your brain.
Holy shit! You got lung cancer in your brain? Are you kidding me?
Yeah, you could have lung cancer anywhere,
dude.
If it gets far enough.
Whoa! Lung cancer in your butt?
Wait a minute.
I don't think that would be very likely, but potentially.
Could you have butt cancer in the brain?
I'm sorry, what cancer in your butt cancer in your brain?
Yes.
Well, you could have colorectal cancer that does metastasize to the brain, yeah.
Oh, God, it's going to happen to me. I just know it.
It's going to happen to me.
Right.
It's not like you could say, hey, Dr. Moore, tear down that wall.
Right. Well, I will say this, and this is another kind of a controversial area. All these developments that I've talked about, these are all in therapeutic applications. But the single best way of preventing there from being cancer is from stopping it not stopping in the first place, but stopping it from becoming advanced. Right. So if you have really good cancer surveillance, if you have really good prevention measures, right? So if you go and have your colon checked out regularly, if you have your your mammograms done and all the other things. I'm not a huge fan of, like, I know these body screen things are popping up now, and I hear these advertisements a lot. One of the issues is that if you go to one of these body scans, it might show something that's not actually something. It's called a false positive, All right, so if you get a false positive, you'll freak out. You go to the doctor. They'll run all these tests. They might do other assays and maybe even start treating you with something when you don't actually have something. So I'm a little concerned that if you do really frequent scans, you're going to end up with more false positives that actually make it not worthwhile. But you should definitely follow whatever schedules of surveillance and prevention that the your physician recommends or the American Medical Association recommends, because that's the best way of not having to deal with cancers by catching it early. Because if it's caught early, it can be cured. If it's caught late, then it can't be cured.
Right. So that's the good news to take home from all this, is that a lot of cancers are very treatable these days. It's not a natural death sentence anymore. I mean, right. I guess some of them are. I mean, unfortunately, I imagine.
Still deadly.
Yeah, but people are doing better now. I mean, it's at least from all my reading, and my understanding is that the number of the all things equal, cancer is not growing in regularity, right? I mean, you take the same age group and then compare it to the number of population, your population, so percentage-wise, it's not getting worse. I mean, sometimes it seems like it is, like, oh, there's more cancer in the world. But I think it's just because we're seeing it more, because people are getting older, right?
Right.
And our population is growing.
And we're seeing different types of cancers too, right? So with lung cancer, it's still the most common, but we're actually seeing less of it now. Same thing with breast cancer.
Could that be because people are not smoking as much anymore?
Yeah, it definitely is because people are not smoking as much.
That's good. That's good. Huh. Okay, kids, quit smoking right now.
Yeah,
I did.
Definitely.
I'm on my second month of Chantix. I've quit, so I'm good.
There you go.
I'm 12 years clean.
Awesome.
Oh, shut up, show off.
All right. Well, we don't want to keep you much longer. I know you probably got to get up and go to work tomorrow. But we're really happy to have you come back on.
My pleasure, guys.
So maybe we'll have you on next season too. It'll be one of our reappearing guests.
Reappearing.
Yeah,
sure.
But we also gotta. Zach is like so brainy, and it's like we don't get a chance to like talk geek with him. You know what I mean? So we'll have to do that next time for sure.
The geek stuff. Yeah, for sure.
But and I want to mention one more thing before you go. Camp Quest.
Yes.
So Zach's a big proponent of Camp Quest. If you watch our previous show, you'll remember that. I donated some money. All you cheapskates, donate some money to Camp Quest. It's great. It really is. It's a really great program.
Yeah. Thanks so much.
Secular program for kids going to camp, and they learn science and they learn all kinds of cool stuff. Much like the one your kid went, your son went to, Mike.
Very similar, actually.
They don't teach anti-religion. I mean, I've read about them. I actually, when my child was first born, I actually was looking at the Camp Quest stuff, thinking when she gets older, maybe I'd like to send her to one. The closest one for me though is it's in Virginia. It's like on the eastern shore, way down in Virginia, Chesapeake. Yeah. It's a bit of a haul from where I am. So I don't know. Maybe. What's it?
North Bay is literally like up the street from you.
Yeah, that's true. All right, we'll have to consider that
Northeast
then.
Maryland. You can check that out.
But go check out Camp Quest, and if you feel so inclined to separate a few bucks from your pocket and give them a hand, they can always use it.
Absolutely.
And then, of course, Dr. Zach, I will list all of the links I listed before. I won't go over them at the moment. Just check them out on the webpage and at the video below and all that good stuff.
Perfect.
All right. Well, thanks for coming on. All right. So we'll see you later. Mike, hang on for a minute. I want to talk to you about some stuff.
All right. Take care, guys.
Take care, Zach.
Take care, Zach. Thanks. All right, Mike. Let's not end the show just yet. We got a little bit of time. Let's do one of our one or two of our movies. What do you say?
Yeah. Wait a minute. I gotta figure out. Isn't there a way to do two people?
No, we don't have two people. Just leave that square blank.
All right. Circle gets the square.
Yeah,
okay.
I never figured that out. We'll figure out something.
Okay. You want to do two movies?
Let's do two movies. So, do you want me to start, or do you want to start?
I want you to start. This was your baby. You wait a minute. You were contacting me earlier. You weren't sure about if we're gonna before you had an idea to get Zach on. We were just gonna go over these movies. You'll explain a little bit more, but I want to hear kind of you set the template, all right, and then I'll go along.
I will. All right, so. One of the things that we're going to start doing is we're going to start having shows prepped for when we don't have a guest. And tonight we didn't have our other two co-hosts, Brian and Allegra. And so
And
I didn't want to. What's it?
No, it sucks because it's not like they're like, oh, I don't feel good, or
No,
oh,
they're doing
no,
stuff.
no.
You know.
It's like Brian is a voice. He's an actor. He's a voice actor. He works in. He's been called out to Funimation Studio. He's working on a project, and they did a call for him. And for him to come out tonight, and it's like it's not like he's like, yeah, dude, I just I don't feel like it. You know,
Right.
He's pursuing his life's dream. Allegra
Right.
has a photo shoot tonight. You saw how awesome she looks in her costume. It's like,
Right.
what are we gonna do? You know, so stop doing it on Mondays, people.
Right, right.
God.
They're doing their geek stuff. So and this is
All
a
right.
geek show. So anyway, we can't dog them for that because this is what we talk about.
Right.
So we'll have to have Brian come on and talk about what he's doing if he can. Maybe, I don't know. All right. So anyway, so one of the concepts I came up with was, and I like this concept. We're going to talk about movies now. Now it won't always be about movies. It could be about anything, anything geek related or whatever. But tonight it's going to be about movies. And we're not going to do like a top 5 or what I think is the best movie or any of that kind of stuff. These are movies that you want to talk about. Now, quite often that is like your favorite movie or what you think is the best movie, but it doesn't have to be at all. It can be like a movie you know is terrible, or maybe even it's a movie you want to talk about that you didn't particularly like, but it brought up something that you want to talk about. It's, you know, it has impacted you in some way or made you think in some way or affected you some way. So I'm going to start with Conan the Barbarian. So, you know, you would think, oh, well, it's not Conan. Like how? Okay, it was a good movie and everything, and it was cool because it's Arnold, you know, getting his thing, you know, getting his groove on and everything, and it was one of his early biggest, like I think it was like pretty much his first really big film, like his first blockbuster. Yeah. So why is that important, and why does that affect me, and why do I want to talk about it? Okay, so for one, I'll start with, it's a great movie. Right, so just right off the bat, it's a great movie. I think it reflects Howard's writing pretty well, but you know, for one, they cast the perfect person. I mean, Arnold Schwarzenegger is Conan. I mean, he really was. There was nobody I can imagine doing him better. Like Jason Momoa did him in the new Conan, and I didn't really. He was all right. Maybe I'm tainted a little bit because the story sucked, but you know, for the time, the special effects were good. And also, when I think of fantasy, right, Conan is what I think of as fantasy. That's what I like as fantasy. Like Lord of the Rings is cool and all. Don't get me wrong, but like if I have a go-to fantasy, it's the world of Conan. Conan is also.
What year did that come out? What year did it come out?
I want to say it was 82.
Okay.
I believe it was either 81, 82, I think. Don't hold me to that, but it's somewhere in there. But it just, you know, so I was 11-ish, 12-ish, somewhere in there. So I was in a very impressionable age. And Conan was one of the first comic books I ever owned. So one of the very first comic books I ever bought for myself. And I'm not talking about like when I went to the store and, you know, and I saw something and I was like, oh, Mommy, buy me this. You know, it was something that I went to the. No, I'm just saying it's something I went to the comic book store, I picked out, I bought, and I read, and then I read on a regular basis. And Conan the Barbarian was it. So on top of all that, I had an older cousin who was about 5 years older than me, and he and I hung out. My cousin Stuart, Stu Dolly, right?
Shamalama ding dong.
Shamalama ding dong. So I used to hang out with him a lot, and you know, and being that he was 5 years older than me, you know, I kind of looked up to him. And you know, he was the cousin I liked to hang out with because he was the older guy, and he was really into weightlifting. And
weightlifting, he loved to play with dogs.
Yes, he loved to play with dogs. Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay.
Get their dick.
So he's lifting weights and playing with dogs.
So anyway, so he was lifting weights. He was really into it, and he played football. And I was very impressionable with that whole thing. I was like, oh yeah, maybe I'll lift weights with you too, and everything, right? And he was like, yeah, sure. So I would lift weights with him, and then, you know, he was really into Arnold Schwarzenegger because Arnold Schwarzenegger was in the weightlifting world. He was a god at that point, and so
Mr. Universe. He had just won Mr. Universe.
a bunch of times. Like he held the record for most number of wins of Mr. Universe, Mr. Oh shit! I used to know all this stuff because I used to be a real big fan. So so I got into weightlifting, and then Conan comes out and just cemented it. Right. So I watched Conan. I'm like, I want to be Conan. Like, I was just like, I want to be like big and muscular and powerful and like, the best things in life,
Yeah.
So I started working out, and that's what got me into working out and lifting weights, and I got all like fucking buff and I mean, for like a 12-year-old, I had muscle. Like when I went to high school, I was the size of a kid still. I was like, I wasn't big at all, but I was more muscular than just about anybody in my class. And when we went into gym, we had these things. Remember, Polly? We had these where you did pull-ups and you did push-ups, and you had to do a certain number to get a grade or whatever. So I was doing pull-ups, and I think I did like 15 pull-ups, right? And the teacher's like, "All right, get down, stop showing off." I found out later that I had just done more than anybody at Polly ever recorded, but nobody said anything. Nobody recorded it, and I could be remembering this wrong. Don't because we know the memory's faulty and everything.
Pump yourself up. Remember it the way you want.
Well, yeah, sure, whatever. But I remember I could have
kept... No one's ever done pull-ups more than that since then.
Right. When I was a kid. No, but anyway, regardless of that, I could have kept going. And then I had the coach. Remember Coach Weibel?
Yes.
Okay, so he
Augie.
Yeah, Augie Weibel.
Baltimore Polytechnic Institute. That's where Pete and I went to school.
So, and he's actually a high school coach that has been on the cover of Sports Illustrated, or been in Sports Illustrated.
Well,
and
now he's in the ground, but yeah.
Now he's in the ground, yes. But at any rate, he bugged me for like a year to join the wrestling team. He wanted me on the wrestling team. He like kept bugging me, and I'm not comfortable with the whole like. Because you'd see the wrestling positions, guys getting on the ground. It looks like he's getting ready to, just like, I'm not comfortable with getting in tights and like.
Whole reach around to the arm.
Yeah, you're right. Yeah, I was just like, dude, I just can't do it. I probably should have though. I probably would have been a fucking awesome wrestler because my strength to weight ratio was incredible at that time. Mm-hmm. So anyway, I'm just saying that's why Conan really
but enough
resonates.
About you. Let's talk about Conan.
Well, but that's why Conan affected me. That's the effect it had on me, and that's why there's a pivotal movie in my life. And let's not forget, the movie was awesome anyway. It holds up. The music is fucking awesome. The costuming was great. The acting was what it was, but the story was really good. And Arnold Schwarzenegger was just like dead on. I mean, there was just no one else to do that. So anyway, you're next.
Wow. I feel like I'm falling short now because I didn't pick a movie that like defined me. Although
it doesn't have to be. It's any movie you want to talk about, any reason you want to talk about it.
Okay. Well, I may have to split this between two movies because I don't know if I can talk equally as much on each of these. But the first movie, I'm just going to go with the first movie I picked, and I had a whole list. I had picked movies from the 80s, the 90s, and the 2000s. I kind of zoomed in on three movies because you originally talked about three movies. So I'm going to just go with this, and it's interesting why I'm going to go with this. The movie Saw.
Okay.
It was for horror movies. It reinvented and kind of woke up the horror industry. From until then, what was a movie like as popular before Saw? I mean, it hadn't been nothing. We hadn't seen anything Saw epic until like Freddy Krueger or
like Freddy. I was gonna say Nightmare on Elm Street or Friday the 13th.
Right, and they kind of just that they're 80s and 90s. I mean, it had been like a good 7, 8, 10 years until we get to I think it was like 04, 06, something like that. That we see Saw.
Right. I see what you did there.
Sorry, I gotta shift it on me. All right. So one of the reasons is I didn't actually watch the movie Saw for like 4 years, okay? And it's really strange why I didn't. I was not the biggest into horror movies. I was more of, like a geek. I was more like I want sci-fi and I want the fantasy to some extent and stuff like that. So, my former wife, never didn't want to watch anything like that. So it just, I wasn't that
into it for whatever reason. So when I met my second wife, my next wife,
your next ex-wife, right?
My next, yeah, right.
You like that?
Oh, come on! I love you, honey. Are you watching? No, there's only it's you, me, and David watching the feed, right? That's 3 people.
Okay, yeah, so good. Yeah.
Sometimes she'll sneak on. So she was really into it, and so I was like, oh, you know how like you develop this barrier? It's like it's been so long since I saw a movie. I don't even know if I want to watch one. Oh, I watched it with an open mind and everything. It blew me away. The plot and the plot devices, and I don't know if you remember a lot about it, but it's like the movie starts like two people wake up in that room, and
right, and they're chained to the thing,
right? Yeah. The one guy's key falls down the keyhole's like, oh, he's screwed now, and the other guy, he's got to either shoot his leg off or and then there's there was people outside that room as well. The one woman who had the bear trap on her, the heroin addict with the bear trap, and what blew me away, like I honestly didn't see it coming, and I think it was the first time that I saw such an intelligent and realized that horror movies could be intelligent, because it's like obviously you could say oh he was under there the whole time. One of the guys is dead in the middle of the floor, and that was we find out later buzzsaw. I mean I think the statute of limitations on
the spoiler limitations.
Yeah. So if you haven't, I'm not going to spoil the second, third, and fourth. Although when you get to like Saw 5 and 6, it's not even wasn't that good. But like the first 3 Saw movies were pretty good. And they tie themselves together, but it was a really good start to what ends up being a really popular franchise for a long time.
So you're saying that you weren't really into horror movies all that much, and did this did this like open horror movies to you?
It did. It made me totally like, oh man, I could get into this. And then I saw Hostel 2.
Oh, Hostel was awesome. Hostel 2 was pretty good too. Yeah.
Really? Phil? Pretty good
I thought
too,
so.
Huh? Yeah. Right up until I don't know, the last 30 seconds or so. What do you think?
Oh, I don't
remember.
remember.
No. Yeah.
The spoilage on that's okay too. Go ahead.
They cut the guy's nuts off.
Oh yeah, you got to think about that.
I don't think I'm the only one. I mean, you act like that's a bad thing.
No, I'm just saying it's like it's okay. I mean, all right, they cut the guy's nuts off, right? All right.
Yeah, all right. Yeah, so we'll cut your nuts off. Yeah, all right.
It's a horror movie, dude. I mean, like.
Yeah, that's what made it a horror.
So would it affect you less if they'd cut his head off?
Yes.
Wow.
That's why they cut his nuts off. That's why they
what
cut
I'm
his
talking
nuts
about,
off.
and that's why they cut his nuts off. That's right.
I know, right.
Okay, I got 2 words for you: chicken scissors.
I know exactly.
All right. So anyway, So that's the effect, huh?
There was Saw, and the other one, I think, I don't know. I can hold on to the other one because we're gonna bring this up again, right? This will be something we'll do again, so I can hold on to the second movie.
Do we want to do a second movie?
We're at 11:15. It's up to you. What do you want to do?
Let's do the second one. Go ahead.
Okay. All right. So I'll just keep going next. Let me see. Wait a minute. Iron Cranes. I just know and never saw the movie. Oh yeah. David's in the chat room and he just
Oh yeah. He's on with his eye, David.
Yeah.
Thanks.
And see, he's with me on this one. He's like,
Hey, David. Who was in your corner at Iron GM? That's right. Me. That's who.
Yeah. The guy who would cut nuts off just for a thrill. Okay. Just remember.
I would do it. In a story, as a writer, I would write somebody's nuts cut off for effect. Not for a cheesy effect. Anyway.
So the next story.
So enough about these nuts.
Yeah, these nuts.
These nuts.
David had said earlier, he was like, "Oh, how if you go balls to, like you get cancer in the balls and it goes to your head? That's just
right.
That's a whole other ball of wax." Anyway, so the other movie is, and this one I guess was defining for me, and yes, it was jeez, what the hell is the guy's name? John Hughes film.
Yeah. Oh, The Breakfast Club. I knew it. I was going to say. Let me jump in there. Yeah, okay.
I knew you knew it. I mean, you know me, right. And so you would have known that. You get total points. But yes, Breakfast Club.
Good movie. Good
yes.
movie.
Saw that. at a pivotal time. I was a little bit younger. I mean, I want to say maybe 14, and the characters in that movie are seniors. So I was fresh in high school or so. And for whatever reason, and maybe this happened to you too, Pete, but there was maybe for you there was a movie that you and another friend of yours like memorized. So me and a really good friend of mine at the time, it was the kid who you always spent the night at his house when you were younger, before you and I met and started sleeping together. So we would sleep every week. It's like you have your buddy you talk on the phone with all the time. We're products of the 80s, and there was no internet, so there was there was no cell phone. You sat at home and talked on the phone after you didn't do your homework. In my case, most likely your case too. So we basically started, and when we get together, we would watch The Breakfast Club every time. It was Breakfast Club and then another movie too, which was I highly recommend if you haven't seen it, which was Weird Science. But Breakfast Club was our main movie. We memorized every line from beginning to end for like 2 years, 3 years straight. We would do nothing but sit on the phone at least once a day. Sometimes we would divvy up characters and be like, "Who do you want today?" It was like a pool, or no, what do you call it when you're picking for a team? You know what I mean?
Right.
Like
so it's like you were doing like Rocky Horror, where people perform the movie while it's going on.
It was just like, it was like, all right, I'll take the beginning, I'll take the nerd, and I'll take this person. All right, well, I'll take that person, and we would literally take different people each time. And
hey, when you took Molly Ringwald, did you rub your nipples? Did you?
I rubbed something.
Okay. Right.
But
hey, she looks good now. You see any?
Yes, I do. I know.
Yeah, she does
yes.
look good. Okay, so I'm sorry. Go ahead.
She was. Yeah. She made me a man.
Hey, you should look it up. There's a movie where she shows her nips, man. She shows her full on.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, you talk about your movie now. I'm just kidding. No, it defined me, the whole interaction, and I can remember thinking, I was never into when I was younger. It was drugs or smoking and all that kind of stuff, and it was like, wow, there's these people that that do these things, and they're high school, and I'm in high school, and and then the love, and then like the weirdo, and it's like, well, where do I fit? Because basically the movie's about all these different archetypes and how you draw these lines, and how one, you can cross in the movie they ended up crossing lines and kind of breaking down those walls and things like that.
You know what movie I used to know lines to? Used to know almost all the words to? Was that movie Better Off Dead?
Yeah. Okay.
$2. God, fuck! I love that movie. Anyway, go ahead.
Where's my $2, bitch?
Where's my money, man?
So, all right, I'll end mine on that one. That was pretty good. And you got about 10 minits till we hit 11:30. So
okay, and we'll kill the show right there. All right.
Yeah.
So so another pivotal one for me in my life, and this again, I'm gonna go with like affected me, like saw it, and I'm not gonna say that the movie changed me, but I was in a place at that time where watching that movie and a change that needed to happen in me coincided, and I feel like it sort of somewhat affected that. And that was, and don't laugh because I know it's going to take a few seconds to get there, but I'll connect the dots. Was
Flash!
The movie?
Oh,
No. I swore.
Of the universe.
No. That is one that affected me in some ways, but I'm not going to go there with that one. I've talked about that enough. No. It was the movie Heavy Metal, the animated one, the original one. From like 80-ish, 82, right? Maybe that's 82 again. I didn't see it when it came out. I didn't see it till several years down the road. So where does this? I mean, how does this come about? All right, so there was this girl that I was very attracted to, and I actually had a crush on her, right? And I was really like all the time just beating myself up, wanted to talk to her, but I was too scared to say anything because I was afraid
something. What?
But I was afraid that she would say no, right? Yeah. So that fear, I was like, I can't stand to be rejected, and then I kept liking her more and more and more, and it was like this weird cycle. Like I couldn't say anything, but then I would like her more, and I built it up into this great huge thing.
It's a crush. It's yeah.
Right. It was a total crush. I mean, and I was like,
and that was
like,
81, by the way, when Heavy
81.
Metal
Okay.
came out.
But that's not when I saw it. So
Right.
I had this massive crush on her. It's funny. I went to see it. I got my older cousin, to try to convince her to take me to see it.
Yeah.
And we got to the theater, and the person at the counter was like, "I don't think you want to take him to see this, because I was 11." And anyway, she talked my cousin out of taking me to see it. I was like, "Damn it!" And then it never came out on like TV or anything. And it was years later when they finally were showing it on a station that you could see, because they had rights issues with the music for the movie. So anyway.
Oh, okay. So it never came out on the VHS.
Well, yeah, it never came out. Yeah, for years and years, and I caught it on a cable channel one night. So I had this crush, and it was killing me, man. I was just like, oh, I gotta say something, but I'm afraid to, and blah blah blah. What if she says no? And anyway, so I was 15. So 1985, I finally see the movie, right? So I was 15. I'm just God, it's killing me, right? See the movie. There's all this I don't know, sex and violence and stuff in the movie, but then something in the movie, I'm just watching it, right? And I'm just like, you know what? I just need to get off my ass, because if I don't, I am never going to be, And remember, hold on, listen. I was a 15-year-old boy in the 80s, right?
Right.
I was all horned up, and I'm not going to make any excuses for it, right? I was all horned up. I want to, I was a virgin still. It's like, I want to get laid. I'm never going to get laid like this, right?
Right. Not like this, Jerry.
Right, and I was just like, God, I'm like, oh, that's it. I'm doing it, right? And the next day, I asked her out, and she turned me down, right?
Oh, I was going to say, the next day, I go over there and I find out she died.
Right. No. So the next
she turned
day,
you down.
Next day, I told her, I spilled it, talked to her about the whole thing. She turned me down, and but you know what? It was such an amazing relief, right? Because it was off me now, right? So I could, I could move on, and I started dating other girls shortly after that, and.
Hey,
it was just,
you went home later and you had a really nasty fantasy. It wasn't all that sweet stuff that was going on before when she turned you down. And you was like,
stop.
Something smacked her, and
so it was a profound moment in my life, and I've never had a crush since then.
Really?
Really, because when I like somebody now, of course, now I'm married, so it doesn't matter. I mean, I can't do that kind of stuff. But I'm saying, if I was single now, right, and I like somebody, I would just go up and tell them. I mean, I might not tell them right away, but I would go up and tell them. And if the situation was that it wouldn't be cool, let's say I worked with them on a daily basis, and I have a kind of a rule about not dating people I work with. But if I were single and I was working with somebody and I started really liking them, there's just something in me that would stop if I wasn't going to say something. I just wouldn't like them like that anymore.
So if you see someone you in a day or two, and you're like, oh my God, I really like her. Oh, then you're like, oh, I'm just gonna go up to her, because obviously you don't want to just belabor it like you did before. That's your conditioning. So what do you say? What are your pickup lines? What do you say to her now?
Well, I don't do I don't have pickup lines.
What do you say? You're like, hey, hi. Do you like the movie Heavy Metal? Because
well, I don't do.
I am, and interesting story about that.
No,
or do you go up to her and you go, girl, did it hurt?
Oh, Jesus!
When you fell from heaven?
No, I go up to her and I lick my finger and I rub her shirt, and then I lick my finger again and rub my shirt, and I go, hey, let's get out of these wet clothes.
Oh, yeah.
No,
That's
I don't,
right.
dude. It's I start talking to him. I don't know. I don't have to tell you. I start talking to him, and it works or it doesn't, and it either happens or I move on. But anyway, and I'm not even haven't even really gotten into the movie itself, because that's not important. It is a great movie.
No, it's all
awesome.
about picking up chicks now. That's what we're.
No, it is an awesome movie. The music is great. The animation, was all right. But I really like the way they tied the five. I think it's 4 or 5 stories together. I don't know, I really liked it. It was much better, I thought, than the Heavy Metal 2000 that came out. And I had the soundtrack. Oh my God, I played that soundtrack. I think I wore a hole in that tape for the original Heavy Metal, the soundtrack for him.
Kids,
But that's
kids, what he said is tape. See, before
Yes.
the advent of the CD
Oh
compact
God, I
disc,
did. I said tape.
Grandpa Pete and I, we used to have these things, and they were square. You know what? Guardians of the Galaxy, that little thing he had with the 2 cogs in the middle, that was a tape, and that actually existed. And yes, when you played it too much like I did with, Uncle Pete doesn't like this too much, but I pretty much wore out my Appetite for Destruction, Guns N' Roses. The first one I ever had, I wore that out in fresh, or like sophomore year or something in high school. So, did you tell her, Pete? Did you tell her? Did you say, "Girl, you know what my shirt is made of? Boyfriend material."
Oh Jesus! Oh God! Stop!
Did you say? And when you got older, did you say, "Girl, have you been sitting on a pile of sugar? 'Cause your ass is sweet."
All right, that's it. Enough. You're killing me here. No, nope, not at all. All right, well.
Girl, are you a camera? 'Cause every time I look at you, I smile.
Jesus. The show is going to implode. All right, real quick.
No, I'm in control.
No, I can kill the stream, brother. So, real quick. I see Speedy's in the room. So that reminds me. Everybody should check out Convention Meet. ConventionMeet.com. It's a social media site for people who go to conventions, sort of like a Facebook, but only for conventions. I guess you could talk about anything there, but it's really geared towards it. And I believe he has some tools in there that are kind of specific to that. And he's been catering to. He has a couple conventions that have signed on with convention-type accounts, which do some more stuff. So. If you get a chance, check it out. Convention Meet. It's pretty cool. Go there, join, sign up. I mean, if you go to conventions, if you watch a show, there's probably a chance that you might. Yeah. And then who else do I want to? Do we want to pimp anybody else besides our guests? Because we got our guests. Check the links down below. I'm trying to think. Oh yeah, right. I knew there was another one. The Aggregate. So our boy Ben Bishop has launched a Kickstarter called The Aggregate, and if you go on Kickstarter, just type in The Aggregate. It's really awesome. It's a graphic novel that's like a choose-your-own adventure. So that is probably, I've never heard of that before, and I think maybe the first one of its kind. So you'll read the graphic novel, and as you go through it, you get to make decisions as to what you're going to do with the character. You'll be given choices, and so every time you read it, the story will be different. So it's pretty cool. Pretty cool. But other than that, I got nothing. Let's bring this show to a close.
Real quick, we're gonna start. Everyone is gonna start pushing their Twitter handles because I just feel like we should do that. I'm trying to get more into the Twitter. So
sounds good.
I am MIKEKAFES on Twitter.
Okay.
And you are at.
I have Ottoblix, OTTOBLIX, which is my personal one, and then which you can follow. I don't do a lot of twittering, but I'm trying to improve that.
We're trying. We're trying to do this. We're gonna start tweeting out. I almost did it today, but we're gonna start tweeting out like when the show starts and stuff like that. So you can follow us at MythWits.
Yes, and then there's at Studio 187.
There you go.
So those
all
are
your
the
Studio 187 needs.
Goodness. So Mike, if you are ready to run the closer, I've got my script.
All right. Now, we never did change the closer. So
we didn't. Are you sure?
We didn't frame you. So I'm going to have to tell you so you don't do this like 2 weeks ago. So you're not like we don't just see like this part of your head. Okay? You may have to just scoot up or down a little bit. So when I tell you up, down, right, left, okay?
Okay.
I'm not sure yet. Okay, so I'll run the closer like now.
Okay, go ahead. Sure.
All right. All right. You need to move it way over to one of the other direction. There you go.
Am I
Keep
good?
going. Yeah. Now, scoot back just a little bit.
All right.
All right. Yeah, a little bit over more.
This way.
Yes. All right. Good. And action.
You've just enjoyed the MythWits. A special thank you goes out to our guest, Dr. Zach Moore. Visit the links below and please support Camp Quest. Join us for a live broadcast next week and every week, Mondays at 9:30 p.m. Eastern Time. Am I still on the screen?
Yes, you're good.
Okay, good. Okay, so you can participate in the chat room and ask questions. If you missed our live show, you can always catch the encore episodes at mythwits.com and on our YouTube channel. Visit us on Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, and iTunes. Make sure to do the like, follow, subscribe thing, and please give us a review on iTunes. It's important. MythWits is a S2E10.com production and is an attribution, not commercial, no derivatives, Creative Commons work. You can download and share it with whoever you like. Just don't change it and don't try to make money with it. This is really uncomfortable. Make sure to check out Studio187.com for more cool stuff. See you all next week.
Oh, God is good.
All right, I'm going to kill the stream.
Kill the stream.